All right, here's part two. Sorry, I had to cut the last video short. My mic was running out of batteries. So we're going to complete the square to find the vertex. It's very same process, only instead of 0 equals and solving, we're instead going to turn our equation into an x minus h squared plus a k, where the vertex is going to be at hk. So we'll start by, just like what we did, getting rid of the numbers. Now, instead of writing this as negative 90 equals, because we have a 0, we're going to put it as y minus 90. Then again, we figure out what are we going to add to both sides. Now, you can take b, divide it by 2, and square it, and you realize that you need to add 100. Or you know that you'll have x minus 10 times x minus 10, which is x minus 10 squared, give you that x squared minus 20x plus a number. And if you realize that that negative 10 and that negative 10 gives you 100, that's what we can do. So I'm going to add 100 to both sides. This turns into y plus 10 equals x minus 10 times x minus 10, two numbers that multiply to get 100 and add to get negative 20. So that's x minus 10 squared. We then can subtract the 10 to put our equation in vertex form. All of a sudden, here's my h, here's my k. Remember, it's x minus h plus k. So h ends up being positive 10, whereas k is negative 10. We probably should just double check things like graph, and we should be using our calculator to double check things frequently. We should see a 10, negative 10. I'm just going to see over here, 10, negative 10. We can kind of see that's the vertex. If I went into my table, I don't like to go into the table frequently, but you can see that 10, negative 10, and that's going to be the minimum value. So that's the vertex. All right, let's do it. This one. Subtract 3, subtract 3. Figure out what number to add to both sides. I can even think, okay, it's going to be x plus 4 squared, which gives me a 16. Or take the b value, divide it by 2, and square it. That's 16. Add 16 to both sides, giving me y minus 13, sorry, that's y plus 13, equals the two numbers that add to get 8 and multiply to get 16 are 4 and 4. So it's x plus 4 times x plus 4. You could skip this step and go straight to x plus 4 squared. Subtract the 13. X minus h, that means h is negative 4. We remember from transformations that inside it ends up being opposite. So it's not that I'm going to get positive 4 or shifting to the right 4. This is shifting to the left 4. This is shifting down 13. So negative 4, negative 13. If I graphed, I'd be able to see that same stuff. So you could see negative 4, negative 13, that's going to be the minimum. Okay. All right, with complex numbers, we can actually do some simplification with them. Okay. And then we're going to finish off with quadratic formula. So we can subtract, we can multiply, we can square complex numbers. And one thing to remember is that just similar to x's, if I have like 3 plus 4x, you can't add these together. They're not like terms. Okay? So this is not 7x. This is just 3 plus 4x done. The other thing to remember is what I squared is. Well, if I is negative 1, root negative 1, I squared has to be negative 1. So if we're subtracting, and I'm subtracting a quantity, make sure you distribute this negative to both things. Now this is a negative 3, so that turns into a positive 3i. We can add our like terms. Negative 5 and 3, that's negative 2. 4i and 3i, 7i. Great. We can distribute. Now just do one step at a time. 2 times 3i, I'm going to turn this into a negative I. That's important. 2 times 3, that's 6. 2 times 4i, that's 8i. Negative I times 3 is going to be negative 3i. And negative I times 4i. So you can always think about this negative I as being like negative 1 times I. So you can multiply the negative 1 and the positive 4 to get negative 4. But then I times I, similar to like x times x is x squared. I times I is I squared. So I got negative 4i squared. The 8i and the negative 3i can combine to be 5i's. But I squared is negative 1. So this turns into negative 1. And all of a sudden, I can simplify more because negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. And then all of a sudden I have more like terms to add together. So I get positive 10 plus 5i. If we did not get this right, we should do it over and over again until we really understand and we really can do it. It's the same with this one. Now, first of all, I could ask you what is 4 plus 5i squared. The first thing you would do is to rewrite it like this. So make sure we understand, like, if you see this on the test, step 1 is to rewrite it like this. But then we're going to distribute because we're multiplying. 4 times 4, 16. 4 times 5i is 20i. 5i times 4 is also 20i. And 5i times 5i is going to be 25i squared. So I got 16 plus, 20i and 20i, that's 40i. Then 25i squared turns into 25 times negative 1. I squared is negative 1. Well, that's 16 plus 40i minus or plus negative 25. I can combine the 16 and the negative 25. It's going to be negative 9. And that would be the simplified 4 plus 5i squared. Okay? Finishing off with the quadratic formula. Please don't be intimidated by the quadratic formula because it's just a formula that will solve any quadratic equation. We get our axis of symmetry and a distance to solutions. If we understand what A is, what B is, and what C is, all we need to do is just some calculations. My solutions are the opposite of 10 divided by 2 times 1 plus or minus the square root of 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2 times 1. That's it. This is my answer. The rest is just simplification. So negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Good. That's the axis of symmetry. This is where my vertex is going to be. Now, over here, figure out what's underneath the square root. Don't do it all in one step. Figure out 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. I probably would use parentheses just to be careful. 92. Great. Divided by 2. Now, if 92 can be simplified, we're done. If 92 can't be simplified, we're done. I'm going to try dividing by some perfect squares. (23 and 4). Okay, sure. Maybe we just simplify. This is root 4 root 23 divided by 2. That is 2 root 23. The 2's will cancel because of multiplication. I get negative 5 plus or minus root 23. Done. That's simple. Now, if you see an equation like this, make sure we put it in standard form by moving everything onto one side. before we identify what A, B, and C are. A is 3, B is 8, C is negative 11. X equals the opposite of B over 2 times A, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all over 2 times A. Okay, this is negative 8 over 6. 8 squared use parentheses though. That way you don't mess up when we have a negative getting plugged in. Times 4 times 3 times negative 11. Root 196. Okay, so this is the square root of 196 divided by 6. Let's think. Is the square root of 196 a perfect square? Oh my goodness, that's great. So I get 14. X equals 8 divided by 6 is the same as negative 4 over 3. If you're not sure how to simplify that, you can divide the top and bottom by 2, or just divide, math enter, simplified fraction, negative 4/3, plus or minus, this is 14 over 6. 14 over 6 simplifies to be 7/3. And I'll let you leave your answers as negative 4/3 plus or minus 7/3. Though you can do the math. Negative 4/3 plus 7/3 ends up being 1. Negative 4/3 minus 7/3 is negative 11/3. Okay. 2 more. Quadratic formula. Subtract the 2x. A is 1, B is negative 2, C is 5. X equals, B is negative. The opposite of B would be positive. Plus or minus square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C. All over 2. That's it. Now just simplify. Over here, 2 divided by 2 is 1. In your calculator, negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. Negative 16. I got the square root of negative 16 divided by 2. Well, now we have a complex number. We know that we can write this as root 16 times root negative 1. Root 16 is 4. Root negative 1 is I. So I have x equals 1 plus or minus 4i over 2. That's the same as 1 plus or minus 2i. 4 divided by 2 is just 2. Okay? Last one. It's x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay? A, this is going to be a good one, is 1. B is negative 6. C is 9. I actually can factor this. So heads up, you can factor this to solve. Watch what we're going to have, what's going to happen when we use the quadratic formula. Opposite of B over 2A. Plus or minus square root B squared minus 4 times A times C over 2A. Let's see, 6 divided by 2, 3. Plus or minus, watch what happens. Watch what happens. Make sure you put negative 6 in parentheses so that you don't make this mistake of your calculator telling you that negative 6 squared is negative 36. You know that's not right. Negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. 4 negative 6 squared minus, oops, 4 times 1 times 9. 4 times 9 is also 36. So I get 0. The square root of 0 is just 0. So that means I have x equals 3 plus or minus 0. Well, 3 plus 0 is 3. 3 minus 0 is just 3. My answer is just 3. This turns out can be factored to be x minus 3 times x minus 3, which means I only have one solution. 3. Okay? Okay. That's the review for your test. Oh, I didn't do one more. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back to 19. If you have a coefficient other than 1, and you're trying to complete the square, divide. Start by dividing everything by 2. Move to 6. You're going to have to add 4 to both sides. Why 4? Because that's b divided by 2 squared. This turns into x plus 2 squared. This is 10. Square root. X plus 2 equals root 10. Can't simplify root 10. Make sure I have the plus or minus. Add negative 2 to finish things off. X equals negative 2 plus or minus root 10. All right, that's it. Thank you.